Hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Thank you for being here. My name is Etmir Yashare and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar titled The Role of ISO IEC 27001, ISO IEC 22301 and ISO 31000 in a unified risk management framework. We're thrilled to dive into this important topic and even more delighted to be joined by our distinguished speaker, Ms. Noor Diab. And before we get started, I'd just like to inform the audience that this session will be recorded and will be posted on our website and YouTube channel along with the slides of the presentation. And an attestation of webinar completion worth 1 CPD credit will be issued within a week to all attendees who participate in at least 60% of the live session. Now, without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to hand it over to our speaker, Noor.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be your speaker for this webinar for today. Thank you for the introduction. Today, we will be talking about the role of ISO 27001, 22301, and 31000, how to put them in a unified risk management framework. So basically, the webinar will be like 60 minutes, or let's say around that number of minutes. The agenda that we'll be talking about today is basically we will talk first of all, what do we mean by a unified risk management framework and why is it important? Why does it matter? We will also understand the different types of standards related to information security. What's the intended outcome of this standard? What does it talk about? How does it fit in a unified risk management framework with other ISO standards, such as 22301, which is related to business continuity, a BCMS, a business continuity management system. And finally, we will also look at the main topic, which is related to risk management, which is the ISO 31000. So we will combine all of these three standards under one unified risk management framework. After that, we will learn how to, let's say, implement this framework in short steps, like a general roadmap, and some implementation. We will provide some implementation tips for unification. So finally, we will close the webinar while discussing the benefits of such a unified risk management framework and what are some next steps and recommendations that you can take as a decision maker or even as an implementer inside your organization for such a unified risk management framework. Now, let's agree at the beginning, whenever we see the abbreviation Unified Risk Management Framework, you might see it as URMF. So this basically stands for Unified Risk Management Framework. Now, as we have said, we are trying now to integrate three ISO standards, three lovely ISO standards actually, which are basically talking about information security, ISO 27001, business continuity, ISO 22301, and finally risk management, the one that is, I consider, the king of all standards, because it can be embedded within every and each ISO standard in terms of having a unified risk management framework in any organization. So I guess this webinar's title was related to these ISO standards, but also we cannot, let's say, oversee or let's say underestimate the role of ISO 31000 in every and each ISO certified standard. So we can create a unified risk management framework with any ISO standard that is also certifiable, like ISO 9001, 14, 45, any ISO standard can be created along with ISO 31000. So it's like, that's why I called it the king of all standards, because it's embedded within every and each standard. But for today, we will discuss the role of ISO 31000 along these two other standards that we see in front of us, which is information security and business continuity. Now, whenever we look at any organization, we can see different layers or levels looking just on the organizational structure. So you can see, let's say, the strategic level, in which we see the top management. And then you see the middle management level, in which we see the tactical level, which consists of the seniors, the managers, and so on. And then you have the operational level, which consists of the junior employees, or the people who conduct the operational daily activities. Now, these layers are existent in any organization. So basically, we want to link each of these levels or each of these layers with the purpose and role of the standards that we see above over here. So basically, ISO 27000 is more concerned with the tactical protection of information assets. And we will see now in the upcoming slides what's the main intended outcome of this standard. Secondly, the business continuity is concerned with the operational continuity during disruptions. And finally, we have the king, which is the ISO 31000, which is related to the strategic alignment of risk with decision making. That's why, again, I'm calling it the king, enterprise risk management, ISO 31000. Now, another differentiator that you need to know here before we move on with this URMF, which is the Unified Risk Management Framework, is ISO 27001 and ISO 22301 share something in common, which is actually they are certifiable, auditable standards. On the other hand, ISO 31000 is not a certifiable, auditable standard. So basically, it's a guideline. It mentions recommendations, not mandatory clauses that are related to the ISO standard as a whole. So no company can get certified against 31000, but on the other hand, companies can get certified against 27000 and also 22301. So they can have information security management systems in place, and they can also have business continuity management systems in place. I mean, they can get a certificate at the end from a certification body. Okay. Now, why is it important to have a unified risk management framework? I will look at it from a different way. I will not answer this question first. What I will tell you is, I believe that each one of you has, let's say, been experienced in the implementation maybe of an ISO standard in their company, and they have noticed that sometimes the company's decision is to implement more than one ISO standard together in something that we call IMS, Integrated Management System. And the first thing that comes into our mind, why does this company want to conduct or implement an IMS, an Integrated Management System? Well, it's basically because ISO made life easier for us. What did they do? They made the clauses of all standards the same. So whenever you find or open a certifiable, auditable standard, you will find that they have the clauses from 1 to 10, from 1 to 10, and the clauses from 4 to 10 are actually what matters for us. So basically, now it's very much easier to integrate these management systems together and implement them together. Now, when these companies implement these systems together, they save time, they save effort, they make it more efficient, producing the output with minimal resources. They make it more effective because we can achieve our intended outcome easily, and because they overlap in many concepts or in many aspects. Basically, or mainly, the main difference between any ISO certifiable standard and the other is the clause that is related to operations, which I call actually the kitchen of the company, because this is what makes it different from other standards, or what makes this company X different from company Y, because its core business is different. So now that was an introduction for this slide. Let's go back to what we have over here, which is, why is a unified risk management framework important? It's the same reason, because it makes it more easier for implementation. Rather than implementing a risk management framework that is separate for each ISO standard or for each management system, now you have them under one umbrella, which means managing such an umbrella is much easier than having many duplicates, than having many people across different departments that are not in one committee doing the same job. Maybe we'll have many redundancies, many gaps, inefficiencies. So basically, having them all under one committee, basically covering all of the aspects of information security and business continuity in this case, makes it more effective in achieving the intended outcome of the standard, which is actually to protect the, let's say, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information, which is for information security, and to make or to sustain the operations during disruptions in case of business continuity. So once we achieve these intended outcomes, we will come up with achieving our strategic goals, and this is where ISO 31000 takes place. Okay, so you can see over here at the beginning, we have 3 main sentences describing, let's say, I can say in other words, the intended outcome of the standard. Any standard issued by ISO has an intended outcome, and I advise each one of you, before studying any ISO standard, you need to look at the intended outcome in order to understand that standard. Let me tell you why. Again, because if you now open the ISO standard that is related to 27001 and you open also the 22301, just open on the table of contents or the index, you will see actually, like what I've stated earlier, they have the same headlines from 1 to 10. What actually is different is how you look at it, the perspective of the standard. So you have, let's say, clause number 4, the context. The context is there in ISO 27 and also in 22301. So what's different? It's how you look at it. In terms of ISO 27001, you need to look at CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data or information. In 22301, you need to look at the purpose of it, which is to recover operations during and after disruptions. Again, ISO 31000, the king of all, guides us in decision-making on the strategic level. It helps us in achieving the organizational goals. And of course, again, since we said that ISO 31000 is the king, it is embedded in every and each single ISO standard in a way or another. And in the upcoming slides, I will show you how. Okay, we've agreed that these standards make it easier for us because it eliminates duplication, it strengthens the governance structure in an organization, it improves compliance to many statutory and regulatory requirements, and it also turns risk into a competitive advantage. So having, as a conclusion, having a unified risk management framework in place makes life easier because it helps us in achieving our organizational roles and, let's say, goals and objectives on the strategic level. Okay. So this table shows everything. It let's say summarizes everything that we have said so far. We have here information security, risk management. Again, for 27001, we have the scope, which is related to technical and operational information security risks. We have ISO 22301, which is related to disruption risk. And finally, strategic and organizational risk, which is related to 31000. Now, when I go through the slides, you will see that you have a small QR code underneath the slide. You can scan it and you can access any PECB training courses that is offered by our organization, Aswaraka Consultancy. Of course, these courses are certified by PECB, so you can just go and register and ask for more information, and you will also receive an email with all of the details. But do this later on, please. Just focus with me. Okay, so basically here we're going to explain, first I told you, as promised, we will focus and talk about different types of ISO standards. Basically here we're talking about the ISMS, Information Security Management System. So now what makes this standard stand apart from other standards is one very important aspect, is that this standard, okay, it has clauses from 1 to 10, but it also has an Annex A. Annex A, it includes all of the security controls that we can implement during implementing the information security management system, and they are reflected in the statement of applicability for any organization that has an information security management system in place. So we have the clauses from 4 to 10. You hear that I'm saying from 4 to 10. They are from 1 to 10, but what's actually important for us as auditors or implementers is to focus on 4 to 10. 1, 2, 3 are merely like an introduction of the standard itself. What are the normative references? What does this standard talk about? And so on. But mainly I'm saying 4 to 10 because these are the clauses that we focus on when we provide consultation or when we, let's say, implement a management system, or even if you're auditors as well, these are the clauses that you will focus on. Annex A, of course, according to the latest version of 27001, it has so many controls. They are classified into different groups. So you can see the organizational controls, the physical controls, technological controls, people controls, 93 controls in total instead of 114 previously in 2013 version. Just a note here before I leave this slide. We need to know that a new ISO amendment has been issued for the ISMS, and you need to look at this if you're a new implementer for information security management system. They have added a very small amendment related to considering climate change as an issue. This is very important. So if you open now on ISO.org for ISO 27001, you will find that there is an amendment in 2024 for ISO 27001. But any other thing remains current, so don't worry. There's no huge difference. It's only this aspect because they have found, because of the many aspects and impacts of climate change, global warming, and many companies, they do not take this into consideration when building their ISMS. So that's why they just mentioned it explicitly in the ISO standard. And it can affect, of course, the physical assets under the ISMS. So what is the role of the ISMS, or how does it contribute to the Unified Risk Management Framework? It actually forms the technical background, okay, the backbone. You can see it's like a skeleton, the technical backbone by protecting the CIA of information across the enterprise. CIA, again, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So again, we have 27001, like what I've said earlier. We have the king over here, ISO 31000. If we look at clause 6.1, in the context of ISO 27001, we can see that it talks about how to address actions to address risks and opportunities. So actually 6.1 in any ISO standard talks about the same thing, and it's very much related to ISO 31000. So like what I said, risk is embedded in every and each ISO standard, and here where it's embedded. Let me just give you an illustration. Just imagine something with me. Now, the first thing that we do, okay, when we want to build a system, regardless what system it is, it could be ISMS, BCMS, any other system. The first thing that we need to do is to understand the context. We need to do we need to know what does this company do? What do they provide? What industry do they operate in? Who are their customers? And what are some of the internal and external issues that affect this organization? Okay, this is the context. Now, when you study the context, you might apply some tools such as SWOT analysis, PESTEL analysis, and so on. This is in clause number 4. Clause number 4 of any ISO standard. Now, imagine here we have clause number 4, which is the main pillar on the left. Now, clause number 5, what does it talk about? It talks about the top management commitment, the leadership, the support that the top management provides in order to implement a proper information security management system or a BCMS. So how would we imagine this? We would imagine this like a bridge, okay? So we have here the first pillar, which is number 4, clause number 4. We have the bridge, which is clause number 5, because if we do not have proper leadership and proper support from the top management regarding the implementation of the ISO standard, we will never achieve our objectives. We will never cross the bridge. We will fall down. So even if you hire an expert consultant and your top management doesn't care, you will everything that the consultant has built is actually down the drain. It's a waste of time and money because you don't have the support, the provision of resources that is supposed to be done by the top management. Now, going back to the example, just focus with me. We have the bridge, which is clause number 5. We cross the bridge effectively. Now, on the other hand, 4, 5, on the other side, we have the second pillar, which is number 6, which we have in front of us over here. Number 6 is what? Is I want to define actions to address what? Risks and opportunities in number 4. So I have defined them when analyzing the context. And now I want to put action plans. I want to put treatment plans. I want to say, okay, the treatment option that I will use is avoid. Or maybe the treatment option that I will use is, let's say, modify. Or maybe share, transfer, maybe accept. Whatever it is, you will choose the security controls from Annex A. So basically, this is number 6, and part of that also is completed in 8 in operations. But we need to understand this linkages between the different clauses. For the first pillar on the left, and then you have the bridge. You will not fall down because you have a good top management style, and they are leaders. They are supporting you. They are providing you with the resources you need, and they understand that this is important. Okay, we will assume that. And then you have number 6, which is the planning, which is actions to address risks and opportunities. Now, in this case, you have formed a backbone. Okay, what you are left with the ISO clauses, you have 7 afterwards, which is related to resources, 8 operations, 9 performance evaluation, and 10 continual improvement. We will not talk about these over here because it's not the main concept or content of this webinar. So basically, this is where ISO 31000 is evident. We have the risk assessment. Since we have identified the risk, we analyzed the risk, we evaluated the risk. All of this is based on the context that you have studied at the very early beginning in clause number 4. So if you don't have proper leadership and continual improvement and proper implementation of controls, you will never have a risk-informed ISMS, unfortunately. Okay, so basically, it's very important to have this in place in order to build an information security risk management engine. Again, we're talking about the tactical risk that is related to information security. Again, what makes this standard lovely for me is that it includes Annex A controls, very organized in 4 main categories. You can write them down: people, organization, physical, technological. In total, 93 controls. Okay, so the last thing that we need to see here or to talk about before we say goodbye to 27001 and go for business continuity is why it matters in a unified approach. Why is it important? So you can see over here, it's the first line of defense against digital threats. It strengthens trust with stakeholders, customers, regulators, and it also directs support business continuity planning. You can see that there are controls inside Annex A from 27001 that talk about 22301, that we need to have business continuity plans in place. So basically, they are also much related. Okay, that's for the tactical part. Now, let's go to the other ISO standard, which is related to BCMS. BCMS, the intended outcome is related to continue operations, even if we face an unexpected event. The main core elements that are related to a BCMS is related to conducting a BIA. So basically, this is the core output of a BCMS. You have the BIA, the business impact analysis. And then you have what is so-called the business continuity strategies, solutions, plans, procedures, the exercises, the simulations, the tests, and so on. That's all in clause number 8. Also, part of building a business continuity management system would be defining key business continuity objectives, such as RTOs, RPOs, and so on. So how is that related to the URMF, the Unified Risk Management Framework? It builds operational resilience to complement information security. You can see here the magical word that I like, to complement information security from the previous slide, and the king, the strategic risk efforts. So they are all linked together. So basically here again, we're talking about 6.1, which is related to risks and opportunities in the same way. We have 4, we have 5, we have 6. Okay, the main pillar on the left, 4, we have the bridge, which is 5, and we have 6, which is the planning phase, which is related to addressing risks and opportunities. 8.2 focuses on risk and BIAs. And of course, at the end, we have, when it's aligned with 31,000, it helps us in achieving the strategic resilience objectives that we have for our organization. And it helps us also in managing operational disruption risk. Okay, if you guys have any questions, just write them in the chat window and we will try to answer these questions at the end of the webinar. So again, business continuity, how does the king come over here? What's the role of the king in this framework? It helps us, it focuses on continuity risks from operational disruptions such as natural disasters, supply chain issues, cyber attacks. It defines the recovery time objective, recovery point objectives. These are called business continuity key objectives or key targets. It also helps us in building the business impact analysis, which yields or results with the prioritized activities that we need to start with if we have a disruption, because they are the most affected in our organization. That's the main role of the BIA, to prioritize recovery strategies. And finally, it's embedded within the exercises, the audits, the tests that are conducted part of the BCMS. Okay. Now we have our king, ISO 31000. It's the turn of this standard. Again, this standard is a guideline standard. It's not a certifiable standard. So basically, a company cannot get certified against it. It's embedded within every and each ISO standard. It's related to, let me simplify this for you. Now, this ISO standard, if you look at it, if you look at the index, you will see that it does not have the hierarchy that is related to the other certifiable standards, which are related to 27, 22301, and any other ISO standard, because it's a guideline standard. We use the verb should, not shall. Shall is mandatory, should is recommendation. Okay? Now, it's not going to be from 1 to 10 in this case. So basically, you have 3 magical keywords for ISO 31000. Write them down. You have the risk management principles, and then you have the risk management framework, and then you have the risk management process. Imagine these 3 are the 3 key magical keywords that operate under the 31000. So if you were nominated by your company to establish a risk management function in your organization, you would certainly need to go and attend the course that is related and provided by PECB, which you can see underneath here on the slide, the lead risk manager or risk manager, in which you will learn the 3 magical keywords. First of all, the principles. The principles are the main concepts that you need to put in your mind, in your back head, once you have been given like the assignment letter by your top management or your superior. You're now responsible for building this risk management function. Go and build this function. Where will you start? The first starting point is knowing what the principles are. So you need to know that a risk management function should be integrated with other functions, integrated. You need to know that it should be customized, no size fits for all. You need to know that it is, let's say, tailored for any organization based on its industry. So there are many aspects or principles that you need to put in your mind before starting with building this risk management function. The second key magical keyword is related to the framework, which is the development of the framework, designing, implementing, making sure that it is as per the plan, checking, and finally taking actions based on the results, based on the evaluation. So basically, finally, once we're done with the principles and once we're done with the framework, now we have the third magical word, which is the process. The process is everything. It talks about the full story. It talks about the full story. So where do we start? We start by understanding the context of the organization, which is clause number 4 in any ISO standard. So you understand, what does this company do? Where do they operate? What products and services do they provide? Secondly, you start with something called risk assessment. Risk assessment, 3 main things. First of all, you identify the risk, which is in clause number 4. And then you analyze the risk. You multiply the likelihood with the impact. You get a level of risk or the score. And then you evaluate the risk. This is the final part of the risk assessment. Now, once you evaluate the risk, you are comparing the result that you got or the score that you got from the risk analysis with the risk criteria, with a baseline that you have established at the beginning when you studied the context. And you are now with the result. You have green, yellow, orange on your risk or opportunities register. So this is basically the risk management process, part of it. The context, first of all, you also study the scope, the criteria, the objectives, and then you go for the risk assessment, which comprises of identification, analysis, and evaluation. And then finally, you go for the risk treatment. And of course, all through the way, you're not supposed to forget about the supportive functions, because without them, we cannot conduct or build a risk management process, which are related to communication, consultation, documentation, reporting, and so on. So let's go back here. So this is about, I gave you like a summary of what does ISO 31000 include, what does it talk about, and basically how is it embedded in every and each single ISO standard. So basically, its role in let's say in other ISO standards, in a unified risk management framework, it provides a strategic foundation to help us in aligning the risk management activities with organizational objectives and governance structures. Okay, just a second. Yes, so this is what I was talking about actually, but I didn't open on the slide. I'm sorry. You can see it in front of you now. These 3 keywords, risk identification, analysis, and evaluation, this sums up to give us the risk assessment. And there's something called risk appetite. Risk appetite, how much are you willing to take or accept risks as a top manager, as a CEO? Do you have a high risk appetite? So you're considered as a risk taker and you will accept all of the risks that you have because you see that you will have a very huge return from them? Or do you have a low risk appetite, so you are risk averse and you will consider avoiding any activity that involves risk? So it depends on the risk appetite. What you need to know over here is that the risk appetite can be different across different departments and across different activities. So a company can be considered having a high risk appetite towards one, let's say, aspect in business, and it could have a low risk appetite toward another aspect. Let me give you an example. If we're talking about a very reputable university, this university would have high risk appetite toward, let's say, research and development, innovation, and so on. They will go forward with such activities that involve high risk, but they know that they will be innovative, they know that they will be creative, they will be ahead of other universities in the region, and so on. On the other hand, they have low risk appetite for health and safety, let's say, issues. So they do not accept that any health and safety issues might arise for the students or for any stakeholder that is working or let's say affected by the activities conducted by this university. So this is what we mean by risk appetite. Of course, we need to integrate this across the whole organization. I think from my perspective and from my experience in developing such standards and having them all unified under one risk management framework, challenge, the most critical and the most challenging part of it is actually related to culture. It's very hard and hectic and challenging to change the culture of an organization. And unless you have, let's say, a supportive top management in which they are enforcing the culture of risk, the culture of information security, the culture of business continuity, you will not succeed. You will not be able, unfortunately, of course, you will not be able to implement a unified risk management framework. Okay, so at the end, of course, the main purpose of risk management is to create value creation and protection. So all of us in our organizations, we have assets. These assets can be tactical, can be tangible or intangible, something that you can touch, something that you cannot touch, like assets like hardware, it's something tangible you can touch. Assets that are not tangible, it's something like reputation, copyrights, trademarks, and so on. So at the end of the day, why am I conducting risk management activities in my organization? For the sake of value creation and protection. So basically, at the heart of the principles that are related to risk management, we have the phrase value creation and protection. If you go back now to the ISO standard that is related to 31,000, going back to the three magical words, remember? We talked about the principles. At the heart of the principles, you will see this phrase, value creation and protection. Okay, for what? For the assets. Okay, so this is the main purpose of risk management activities. It helps us in taking decisions. It helps us in being responsive, in being dynamic, and so on. Okay, so that's basically for these three standards. Okay, we have, I guess, 8 minutes to go before we have the questions, or maybe 13 minutes. Okay, so basically, this sums up all of the things that are related to, let's say, this table, how they work together in a unified risk management framework. You can see over here, we have the function, the focus, the key tool, the primary outcome, and the key document. This sums up everything. So you have ISO 27001. It focuses on information security threats. You have ISO 22301. It focuses on operational disruptions. And again, 31,000, our king, it focuses on strategic and business risk. Now, the key tools that we use, it's obvious. Here you use the management system that is related to information security. Under business continuity, you use the BCMS, and under 31,000, you use the risk framework, which is the second magical keyword. Now, the primary outcome, or the intended outcome, protected data, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability, ISO 22301 to sustain operations during disruptions, ISO 31,000 to make informed decisions, and to help top management or the senior level to take decisions in regard to the risks that they face in their organization. Now, this might help you, the key document, which is the main, let's say, deliverable that you will have. In terms of ISO 27001, you will have a statement of applicability, which we call SOA. This mentions or lists down all of the security controls mentioned in Annex A, along with like an explanation of this control. Is it applicable, not applicable, and a justification for inclusion or exclusion. That's the SOA. There's something that I forgot to tell you. Annex A in 27001 is not a standalone annex. It goes back to an ISO called 27002, okay, which is a guideline. So if you want to take more details about the security controls, you can read 27002, but they are mentioned in a summarized table in ISO 27001. Now, the deliverables for ISO 22301, we have the business impact analysis, the business continuity plans, the disaster recovery plans, and finally, for ISO 31000, we have the risk register and policy. Before we leave this slide, let me tell you something very important. Most of the time, organizations think that the ISO standard only focuses on risk and focuses only on negative aspects of the organization. They always think that, okay, we need to have a register containing or answering the question, what might go wrong? Well, this is correct and incorrect. Part of it is yes, risk is part of it, but you need to also consider the positive things which are considered the opportunities. So whenever you want to align your management system against any ISO standard to get certified, you need to have a register that combines risks and opportunities. It combines all of these two together. So I know that inside the standard it mentions internal and external issues, and issues in the English language means something challenging or something bad or something negative. But also the ISO explains again that issues can be positive or negative. So this applies to all ISO standards. You need to have the same way that you give interest in defining risks, you also need to give the same level or weight to opportunities. Okay, this is a maturity level, which we can use like when we want to conduct a gap assessment. Like if we want to know to go to company XYZ and they have asked us to conduct a gap assessment for the risk management framework, we can use this as a reference for the maturity level. So it's like a criteria that you can use. It can be different. You can use any other criteria for your gap assessment. So basically you have a Likert scale from 1 to 5. You have initial, ad hoc. You have developing, defined, integrated, optimized. Whenever you go from the maturity level from 1 to 5, you get more mature. It means that you have a more defined framework. Optimized, that's the best thing. And the very initial starting stage is the initial stage. Now, what are the characteristics that are related to each one of these? So if you read at the initial level, you have individual risk practices. So maybe we have X department, Y department, Z department. Each one of them has different risk practices. They're not all combined under one umbrella, under one unified risk management framework. So maybe they don't have any integration between the standards. The risk response is reactive, not proactive. Reactive, it means that they wait for something bad to happen. They're not proactive. That's the initial stage. Now, what do they focus, or what are we supposed to focus on? We need to make people aware of the risk of the standards related to 27, 22301, and 31. Same goes if you go for developing level. They have some documentation, basic risk assessments in place. We will start aligning these with all departments. Number 3, level 3, we have documented and repeatable risk management processes. We have some clear roles and responsibilities. You know, it comes in the middle. Not bad, not good. We can start by cross-referencing ISO standards and see what elements are in common. Integrated, it means that it is integrated across different functions and operations in the organization. They have a unified risk register, shared risk treatment plans, but still they did not reach, let's say, the optimized level in terms of continual improvement. They haven't still seen the risk as a strategic enabler, and so on. For each one of these levels, we can focus with this company on a specific area, and we can consider it like a step-by-step gradual process. So no company can be initial and then all of a sudden becomes optimized. They need to consume some time, some effort, and so on. Here we have the implementation roadmap. Before we conclude, the implementation roadmap, everything in ISO standards and even in our personal lives, it goes across something called PDCA. Plan, do, check, act. So even if you plan to do anything, personally, you will start by planning, then you will start to execute the plan, and then you will start by checking, did actually the implementation be as per the plan? And finally, you will go for acting based on the results of the evaluation or the checking. So the same thing goes here. You always need to think about ISO standard implementation in a consistent, systematic, structured manner, because they are standards, which means they are created to structure your organization, to make it more organized. So you need to look at it in a very structured and consistent manner. Start first of all by planning. So you have initiating and aligning. You identify the stakeholders. This is the first thing, the risk owners. The stakeholders under the terminology of ISO are called interested parties. And then you conduct a gap analysis. And then you can define the scope, the objectives, the KPIs, success metrics, and so on. That's the first phase. You start by designing the framework. So maybe you will mention what policies and controls will be developed. You will start by aligning the risk assessment and treatment processes, creating a unified governance structure. Okay, once we have this in place, we start by implementation, training for all teams across all levels. Finally, we're supposed to always, there's something very important here, which I always notice, that companies conduct everything state of art, but at the end, they forget to conduct, or they forget to measure the effectiveness of what they have done. This is very important. And as a management system, let's say a professional auditor would always look at this point in terms of, is the system in place effective? Did it achieve the intended outcome? And this will become harder by time, because you will need to prove that you are being effective all through the years that you have maintained your certificate and management systems. So you need to have KPIs, you need to have continual improvements, you need to have updates and so on, based on the best practices and what's actually happening around your organization. Let me see, we have 2 to 3 slides. I will sum them now in like 2 to 3 minutes. Implementation tips for unification. I told you the hardest thing about conducting a unified risk management framework is related to enforcing changing the culture, because you will face resistance from the people. So you can conduct a crosswalk analysis to align the controls between these different standards. You can establish a central risk function. I told you, imagine yourself as a person who has been nominated to conduct to lead a risk management function in the organization, because it will be the central risk function. It will integrate all of the functions. Use a unified, this is very, very, very important. Use a unified risk register, because if you don't have a unified risk register, every department will have its own register, and at the end of the day, again, it's a waste of time. You're duplicating efforts. There are many redundancies, many gaps, and this will make you vulnerable for many, let's say, attacks, threats, and so on. Integrating monitoring is very important, because one of the main concepts of ISO is 9, performance evaluation, which is related to KPIs, internal audit management review. So this is something essential. And then you have train cross-functional teams. Of course, you need to train them. You need to conduct awareness session. And this is part of 7.2 in any ISO, competence. You need to make people competent. Okay, benefits, of course, which is the opposite of the drawbacks of not having a unified risk management framework. Obviously, it eliminates duplication, centralizes governance. You have one risk management committee, not more. Improves response time, reduces audit fatigue, and builds the risk culture in an effective manner. Finally, it's recommended, after you have built all of this, of course, it's a very good work that you have done so far, you need to conduct like a GRC gap assessment to evaluate your current status. Maybe establish a cross-functional risk steering committee if you haven't yet established this, and also define a 12-month roadmap for integrating different ISO standards. And maybe in the future, you will start and say, okay, I'm now enough with information security and business continuity, and I want to go for further ISO standards to integrate under this unified risk management framework. It's completely okay. And finally, you secure your executive sponsorship and align with strategic planning cycles. So basically that was for today's webinar. I guess I'm late 4 minutes. I'm sorry about that, for the questions and answers. And here we would like to introduce you, of course, to the PECB Skills Platform, which is provided by PECB. This is a very, very, let's say, a good platform that you can use as a professional. It includes 15-minute courses on different topics relating to AI, cybersecurity, data protection, and many, many more. And of course, you can go for a subscription and earn CPDs for each competency and get certified. So I leave the floor now for PCB team. Thank you very much.
Noor.
Welcome.
Well, a lot of questions have been coming on. I don't think that we will have time to take them all, but let's start with the first one. Which of the standards mentioned is the best to help with the institution evaluate risk associated with the governance of the institution? Now, by governance, the person asking these questions, he means the board of directors.
Okay, well, it depends on how they look at it and what are considered. They need to prioritize the risks. If the risks are more related to information security, so they would start for 27001. But if they want to start one by one, but if they see that they have many disruptions that can come in their way and can be challenging, so basically they can go for BC, for the business continuity. But what I suggest, actually, if they have the capacity to build an integrated management system from the start, it would be wonderful, because they will tackle, or they will be able to, let's say, manage to achieve more than one objective at once. Okay, and there's also an ISO standard that is related to governance, which is 37,000. So they can also consider the standard, but this is beyond the concept or the content of this webinar. Okay, which is related to corporate governance.
Thank you. Another question says, for the ISMS, why do you refer to the ISO 31000 and not the ISO 27005? That was developed specifically for the information security. For me, the ISO 31000 is more general. That's the follow-up comment from the person asking this question.
It's a very great question, actually, and I forgot to mention this point. There's a very dedicated risk management guideline for ISMS, which is 27005, and it goes for specifically information security risks and threats. So yes, thank you for raising this question. But actually, because the topic of the webinar was related to these three standards, so we were focusing on ISO 31000. That's the reason. But yes, 27005 is embedded within the 27001. It's much more related than 31, because 31 is more general.
Thank you. Another question says, why are we focusing on ISO 27001 clauses 4 and 5 and not ISO 27005 on this unified risk webinar? But I believe that you already answered this. Okay, another question asks, what approach and structure would you recommend for conducting BIA? Sorry.
What a form of structure?
Yes, what approach and structure would you recommend for conducting a BIA?
Well, first of all, you need to follow the requirements that are mentioned in clause number 8 related to the BIA, the business impact analysis, which is basically, first of all, you need to mention all of the functions that are under scope. These functions, what are the resources that they depend on, the dependencies, how much do they need in terms of human resources, ICT systems, logistics, financials, and so on, all types of resources under normal operations. That's the first step, to identify the functions and what resources they need, under normal operations. The second step would be to analyze what are, let's say, the disruption times for each, how would the disruption affect each of these activities according to the RTOs and according to the RPOs and the MTPDs and so on. Finally, you will get what are the resources that we need under these disruptions according to these key business continuity objectives. And the last step would be the prioritized list of activities. So basically that would be for 22301 in terms of, there are different structures, but obviously you need to go back to the standard itself in clause number 8 to see what are the main elements that needs to be covered in building your BIA. But basically it's the list of functions under normal operations and their resources, and what are the resources that you need under, let's say, specific time frames of disruption. And at the end you get the list of prioritized activities to start with and to focus upon for disruptions. Next question, please.
Shouldn't the risk appetite across units, whether high or low, be aligned with the risk appetite determined by top management? And another similar question says, is the risk appetite and tolerance identified on risk level or organization level?
Okay, so the risk appetite, can you just remind me of the first question? It's I just did not focus on it.
Shouldn't the risk appetite across units, whether high or low, be aligned with the risk appetite determined by top management?
Yes, of course, it should be aligned with the top management, because this is a decision that is taken by the top management in consultation with the department heads. So basically it is a decision taken by the top management. So it's on the senior level, the top management level, for the risk appetite. What was the second question?
The second question was, is the risk appetite and tolerance identified on a risk level or organization level?
Again, you need to link them together. The organizational level, we need to know what is actually happening on the risk level to identify these risk appetites and risk tolerances. It depends on the leadership style of the organization. We have different leadership styles. It could be democratic, it could be laissez-faire, it could be autocratic. So based on that, they will decide, and based also on the complexity of the operations and the activities that are being conducted in the organization. So the risk appetite and the risk tolerance, mostly they are determined by the top management on the organizational level, and then they can be cascaded down to the risk level based on what the top management sees on the strategic level. Okay?
Thank you. And one last question that we will take is, how can we combine URM with internal auditing? What are the obstacles and advantages of them?
Okay, that's a very good question, actually. And there's a very big part of the PECB lead auditor courses offered by PECB that tackle this part, a very unified section talking about how do we, let's say, embed risk within the internal audit function as a whole, since the very early planning phase until we mention and draft the conclusions of the audit. So you need to always, whenever you're considered like an auditor, whether internal or external, think about the internal audit process, like always think about what might go wrong, even at the very early beginning. Maybe you will face someone who is very resistant to provide you with the information that you need. What will you do? Maybe you will face someone who's not available at the office when you have scheduled a meeting with him. Maybe you will face someone who is acting in a hostile approach. He does not accept the facts that you have raised, although they are facts. So you need, these are some things that you might face in terms of implementation of the audit itself. There are other risks, of course, related to inherent risk, control risk, detection risk. All of these should be taken into consideration when conducting the audit, whether it was internal or external, because sometimes we might have a risk of not being able to detect a risk, although it's there. There is a major non-conformity, but the auditor was not able to detect it. This is a detection risk. Maybe there are risks associated with the inherent system of the organization without any controls in place, and so on. So yes, you should look at let's say the risk management to be embedded within every and each single aspect of the internal audit process, from the very early beginning till you reach the conclusions and findings and conclusions and write them down in your report.
Thank you, Noor. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we had for the Q&A session. But don't worry, any unanswered questions will be addressed and published in the next edition of the PCB magazine. So make sure to subscribe and stay informed. You can find the link to subscribe on the chat box. Now, before we wrap up today, I'd like to remind you of our on-demand learning platform, PCB Skills, created to help professionals like you stay ahead with flexible bite-sized training capsules. The platform is designed for practical learning, short, focused modules that fit into your busy schedule. You can start learning immediately, track your progress, earn CBD points and attestations, and even get certified. If you are interested, please reach out to sales@pcb.com to book a meeting and explore the catalog. No extra fees after registration, just one subscription, and you get full access. Once again, if you are interested, please reach out to sales@pecb.com to book a meeting, and we will get back to you with further assistance. Now, once again, a very quick reminder, this session has been recorded, and the recording of this webinar, along with the presentation slides, will be made available on our website and YouTube channel within a week, and we will notify you accordingly. And additionally, an attestation of webinar completion will be issued within a week to all participants who attended at least 60% of the live session. Thank you all for your time and engagement today, and a special thank to you, Noor, for delivering such an insightful session. We hope to see you again, you all, at our upcoming webinars. Take care, and see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.